The things of earth are dimming in the light of your glory and grace. I'll set the sights upon heaven. I'm fixing my eyes on you. Oh, 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 yeah. Oh, oh. I'm fixing my eyes on you. Oh, 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 yeah. I'm fixing my eyes. Love like I'm not scared. Give when it's not fair. Live life for another. Take time for a brother. Fight for the weak ones. Speak out for freedom. Find faith in the battle. Stand tall but above it all. Fix my eyes on you. Oh, 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 on you. I'll fix my eyes on you, on you. I'll fix my eyes on you, on you.
Well, I'm genuinely going to miss getting to watch you guys sing to that song and bounce your heads. Like I get a sneak peek into how you are in your car when you're driving along, because apparently people don't think that I'm looking back at you while it's going on. But I'm excited to be here today. I genuinely am. I've never been more excited about Element Church and what God's doing here in Shelby and in the future. Just standing in the back and getting to watch. I was standing behind my grandmother. She celebrated her 80-something birthday this week. She wouldn't tell me. She said she was 39. And so 80-something, and to see her raising her hands and worshiping during Revelation song, and then to see right across the auditorium, the gym, to our students, 16, 17, 18 years old, worshiping the same God in the same song in the same place, different generations, different backgrounds, different levels in life, all together in this church. I love it. And as you look around, we're pretty full in here, right? And we've been talking and praying about should we add more seats, and we're seeing what we should do there, but I think God's up to something even bigger than that. So just be praying with us about what God's going to do right here in Shelby in the future with this church. And so if you have your copy of God's Word, go and open up to Matthew chapter 14. We're going to be finishing up this Fix Your Eyes on Blank series today. And in the last couple of weeks, as you're opening up to Matthew 14, I'll talk about our current situation, North and South Carolina. In the last couple of weeks, we saw a storm come through that dumped more water on the two states than I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. Maybe you've lived longer and you say, no, this storm then was worse, but this one has to be up there, right? I was reading a USA Today article that said, and during that storm, during that time period, it dumped approximately 11 trillion gallons of water on the two states combined during that time. 11 trillion gallons. And when you get to that size and that number, they might as well just said it dropped a gazillion gallons. Because what does 11 trillion gallons really look like? How do we comprehend that? They had a little infographic under it that was trying to help us comprehend that. It says, think of a standard 16 by 32 foot swimming pool, your standard rectangular pool. It said it was the equivalent of 636 million swimming pools being dumped on the state all at one time during that one storm. If you're a sports fan and you watch the bowl games on New Year's Day and you've watched the Rose Bowl, for 100 and something years, this famous stadium, Pasadena, California, they said it was the same thing as taking 130,000 Rose Bowls, filling that stadium to the top and then just pouring them on North and South Carolina. It was the equivalent of 1/3 of all the water in Lake Tahoe just dropped in that storm's time period. It was enough water to completely end the drought in California that we seem to always hear about. All that said to say it was a terrible storm, right? It killed over a dozen people. The cost to repair are in the billions now. It was trying. It was costly. It was a terrible storm, literal storm. And I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, that I believe everyone in this room is at one of three places when it comes to storms. You're either walking into one right now, or you can stand there and you can see the storm clouds rolling over the mountain coming into your life. You're either in the thick of it, you can just feel it, the wind and waves and rain, it's just beating down on you, or you're either coming out of it finally. The sun just broke through and you're able to catch your breath for a moment, and then guess what? I'm here to encourage you today. You're going to end up back here, heading right into one. It seems to be the way life goes. And so as we finish out this series, I just want to encourage you. I want to leave you with a plan so that you can get through the storms that life throws our way. And we're going to look at it in Matthew chapter 14. So let's read this, picking it up in verse 22. Hopefully it'll be on the screen. Right before the service started, I don't know if you were in here, you saw the screen was going out and we didn't know if we were going to have it. And I thought, it's kind of hard to preach about staying calm and trusting God in the storm if we're going to freak out about a screen going out, right? And so I told him, I said, hey, we'll go with or without it, no big deal. And it was like God said, I just want to give you a little pop quiz, just see if you would pass. And then the screen turned right back on. So here we go. Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. It says, immediately he, Jesus, made the disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way off from land, and many stadia. We'll see as we continue to read through here and talk through the sermon. They're about 3 or 4 miles out in the middle of the sea. And they're being beaten by the waves. It means tormented. It is just relentless, unstoppable. These waves just keep going, and they're not moving forward. They're stuck in the middle of this storm, for the wind was against them. It was contrary. It was in direct opposition to them and where they wanted to go. Verse 25, and in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. I pray that we get a fresh glimpse of that, because we can hear this story so often. And if you were born and raised and in and around church, you've seen, flannel grass, and you've heard this story, and it's been your Sunday school lesson countless times, and we just kind of throw it out there. Yeah, he walked on water. He walked on water in the middle of this storm. I pray our hearts and minds grab that. Verse 26, but when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. They said, it's a ghost. They cried out in fear. But immediately, Jesus spoke to them saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come out on the water. And he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water and he came to Jesus. Here's the shift. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they had got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Would you pray with me? Father, I pray that's where we end today, worshiping you. A greater level of intensity and authenticity that, wow, you are the Son of God. You calm the storms. You walk on the water. No matter what we're facing, remind us that you're big enough. Remind us that you still have that power. Lord, encourage hearts in here today. Speak to them through your word. May we leave here trusting you, leaving this series, not just something that we spent 6 weeks in and we forget about, but may it truly be life-changing. That we fix our eyes on you in the middle of the worst storms that we could possibly imagine. It's in Jesus' name we all pray together. Amen. So we're going to look at 4 things. If you're a note taker, go and pull out your information pack and your notes. And we're going to 4 reminders that I want to give you to fix your eyes on, to fix your focus on when the storms seem to be too strong. And sermons kind of take on different emotions. They take on different feelings, at least from a speaker's standpoint. There's some where you're just fired up and you're about ready to explode and, just kind of preaching powerfully. There's some that are a little more calm and reflective, and I feel like that's what this is today. You know, if I was able to just sit across the table from you and say, hey, this is my departing words for you. This is what I want to leave you with. I just want to remind you. I just want to plead with you to remember these truths when you're facing the storms that life throws your way. And number one, I want us to see that just because the waters rise doesn't mean you're out of God's will. Just because the waters rise, just because the storms come, just because the waves seem to be coming in the boat now, doesn't mean you're out of God's will. Doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Look at verse 22. Immediately, he made the disciples get in the boat. It literally, he sent them on their way. He sent them onto the sea, and he knew the storm was coming. He wanted them there. Maybe that's where you are. There's a storm all around you, and you are in complete obedience. Don't freak out on God and say, I shouldn't have trusted you. I shouldn't have listened. I shouldn't be here right now. Just because the waters rise doesn't mean you're out of God's will. Now, for some of you, maybe it is that. This is not a Jonah sermon, right? It maybe some of you have brought the storms in. Maybe you have brought the chaos and the consequences because of all your running and rebelling. And just to give you a mini sermon, if that's you, if you're in the middle of the storm because of that, in the same situation that Jonah was in, repent. Cry out to God. Call out to Him. Beg Him for mercy, and you will receive it. But for those of you that you say, I'm trying to follow, and I've been trying to fix my eyes on Jesus, and the more I seem to fix my eyes on Him, the harder the wind seems to blow. Anybody connect with that? I feel like I'm just trying to follow you. I'm trying to trust you, and the waves got higher. Let me encourage you that just because you're in a storm doesn't mean you did anything wrong and are being punished. More than likely, it could mean that in your obedience, you're being perfected. You're being polished, you're being prepared, you're being refined for something greater, for something bigger, for something stronger in the future, and He's preparing you for it now. I think that through this problem, we're seeing that God's saying for His disciples, He's going to see if they're going to pass the test of trust. You going to trust me in this, Peter? You going to trust me in this, John? You going to trust me in this, James? Because I'm not going to always be here. And what are you going to do when I'm gone and the waves get higher? Are you going to remember a time like this? Are you going to be able to pass the test and remember my power? Are you going to be able to pass the test and remember all the promises I made for you? I hope so. You ever been in class and have those moments where it's coming towards the end of the day and you can tell you're getting close to the end of the lesson, but there's some extra time left in the class? And so the teacher kind of wraps up the lesson and she goes, all right, everybody got it? Or he goes, everybody got it? You good with it? You feel confident with the lesson, the concept we just taught? And in your mind, you're thinking, oh, we're about to get some free time. So yes, say yes. Everybody say you got it. Act like you really know what we just went through. Even if you don't, just fake it, right? So we don't have to do any more. What's the teacher do? All right, well, if you got it, close your books, pull out a piece of paper. We're going to take a little pop test, right? Let's really see if you have it. Let's test it and see if you really have the concept in your mind. And I feel like that's what Jesus is doing here. Because you see in verse 22, it says immediately. Immediately after what? Well, if you've looked in this chapter, in chapter 14, it's immediately following Jesus taking a few sardines and saltines and feeding 20,000 plus people. He's saying, all right, I want to see if you got it. I want to see if you can remember and you really understand my power. I want to see if you really understand my provisions. I want to see if you really understand that I'm a promise keeper, that I'm a need meter. Hey, do you really get what just happened? That a little boy came up with some bread and some fish, and there were 20,000 plus people here, and I took it, and there was more left over after everyone had eaten until they were about to bust, and we started with. Do you remember that? Let's see. Let's test it. When you get in the middle of a storm, do you forget the power that you just saw displayed in your life the month, the year, the decade before? We're quick to do that, right? I'll see God come through in some amazing way, and then something immediately comes into my life right after. Let's see if you remember. Let's see if you trust enough to pass the test. When you get in the middle of a storm and things go wrong, but you're in the middle of God's will, do you immediately begin to regret your obedience? I knew I shouldn't have trusted you. I knew I shouldn't have listened. I knew you wouldn't come through like you did in the past. We instantly begin to forget, right? Don't forget that. Don't focus on the problem. Focus on this power in the past. Focus on how he's come through before and trust that he can do it again. I was reading something this week that really encouraged and helped refocus my mind on this fact. Because we're all sitting here in this room and everything's calm, right? It's not spinning. Hopefully the room's not spinning for you. Hopefully you're not about to black out on us. But in reality, the world that we are on, this gigantic planet, is spinning on its axis at a rate of about 1,000 miles per hour. This gigantic hunk of rock floating through space is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. Not only is it spinning like that on its axis, but it's hurtling through space at approximately 67,000 miles per hour. Can't even comprehend that, right? We go 120 in a car and we're about to wet ourselves. It's crazy how fast that feels to us. 1,000 miles per hour spinning, 67,000 miles per hour hurtling through space. And guess what? It doesn't deviate from its path. It doesn't spin out of orbit. It doesn't lose traction and lose its spin and slow down or any of this. God in all his power is keeping our planet on its perfect path. Why do we think he can't calm the storm in our life? This measly little thunderstorm that's popped up. Why do we not trust that? Mark Batterson said, keeping the planets in orbit is a perpetual miracle of unparalleled proportions. It's happening all the time. It's never stopping. He's saying, do it again. Do it again. It listens. It does exactly what he says. And guess what? He's the same one that can look at the storm and the wind and the waves and say, stop. And they listen. They still know his name. They still obey his commands. Don't fail the test of faith. Don't forget his power and don't forget his promises either. Because look at this. It says in verse 22, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. If you read the Matthew, Mark, and John accounts of this story, it's implied that Jesus is saying, okay, guys, here's the plan. Get in the boat, go before. I want you to get out of this situation. If you read the Mark account, it says a specific location where they're going to go. It's implied here that he's promising them, hey, trust me, go ahead. Go prepare it. I'm coming behind. I'm going to meet you here. Just believe me. But from our perspective, it looks impossible, right? How's he going to meet us? It's the middle of the night. The storm has come up. And guess what? If you read the John account, it says that they took the last boat. So how are you going to get to the other side? It's storming. It's late. It's dark. We're tired. We took the only boat. He can't come, right? That's what my mind would say. That's what I start screaming out when I'm in the middle of a storm, when I'm in the middle of the problem. Yeah. You said all of this stuff, but look at the facts. Look at it practically, God. It's dark, it's late, it's storming. You don't have a boat. How are you getting onto the other side of the lake? When you're God, you don't need a boat. When you're God, when you're all-powerful, you just decide to walk on water. And our heart should be in it. Look, I don't know how. I don't know when. But he said he would, and I believe he will. I'm going to trust his promises. We just saw him provide like never before. How can we not trust in the middle of this storm that he'll come through? Do you remember his promises that he's working for you, that he's working this for your good, that he's on your side, that he who is your help never sleeps. He never slumbers. He never takes a moment off. He's always in control. Do we remember these promises when we're in the middle of a problem? Do we remember promises like Hebrews 13:5 where he says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you? If we just got that, if we just held on to that in the middle of our problems, our lives would be so radically different. I was studying that verse a little bit more this week, and in the Greek, there's actually a double negative there. So really it should read so emphatically, hey, listen to me, I will never, ever leave you. And I will never, ever forsake you. That's what it really says there. Ever, ever, ever. Do you believe that? Do we trust that all he's doing in this storm is creating a controlled chaos so that we can learn the lesson? He's in control. He's got it. If we'll just trust him. That's what I think he was doing for the disciples. I think that's what he does for us. Number 2 reminder that I want you to have is that Jesus walks on top of the problem that threatens to take you down. Jesus walks on top of the problem that threatens to take you down. It says that he came to them in the fourth watch of the night, walking on the sea. Remember the sea, the wind, the waves, that's what's in direct opposition to them. That's what's tormenting them in this verse. And the water that threatens to be over their heads, Jesus has under his feet. I'm in control of this. And this wasn't just a quick magic trick that you better look or you're going to miss it. Look, he's walking, but oh, he's sinking now. No, he's been doing this for 3 or 4 miles. He's doing a water 5K. Like, I can keep doing this if you want me to. Like, I don't have to stop this at any time. I'm in complete control. This isn't just a flash in the pan. I got this. So if we truly believe this, we need to remember that which we fear will overtake us so many times, Jesus has already overcome. Warren Wiersbe, a famous Bible teacher, said, Jesus was walking on water to show his disciples that the very thing they feared was only a staircase for him to come to them. He was just rolling out the red carpet so that he could come to them like never before. And maybe that's what God's wanting to do in the storm that you're facing. It's just a staircase. It's just an avenue, an alley, a way for him to get to you in your situation like never before. No matter how big or small, do you believe that Jesus is greater? Do you believe that he has overcome, that affair that seems like it's going to take you under? We realize that Jesus overcame the adultery of all mankind. That addiction that is pulling you down and seems like it's getting ready to take you under the water, Jesus walked completely over the addiction of idolatry of all humanity. That debt that is swallowing you whole, Jesus paid the sin debt of the entire human race. He's on top of whatever's trying to take you under. If we'll trust him in that. Jesus would later say in Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. All authority. I've got it. If you'll believe it. Tony Evans, famous preacher, tells a story about being on a cruise ship with his wife, and they were getting ready to enter into a storm while they're on this ship. The captain comes over the intercom and says, we're getting ready to go into this storm, but everybody calm down, just hold on. It's going to be a few hours of rough water, but we're going to come through it fine. Just trust us. Well, Tony Evans' wife was not having any part of this. She did not want to hear that. She was freaking out, and she went through every avenue she possibly could. And finally, she got in touch with the captain's assistant. And she gets him on the phone, and she's laying all this stuff out. Why are we going into this storm? Why don't we just put down anchor right here? Why don't we just wait it out? Or why don't we just go around it? Why don't we look into other options instead of going directly into the mouth of the storm, right? Don't we do that with God all the time? Whoa. Why don't we do this or that? I know you're the captain of the ship, and I've never driven a boat in my life, let alone a cruise liner, but I think this would be better to do. Don't we do that with God? Let's put down anchor. Let's just go around it. But the assistant listened to her and said, ma'am, I'll check with the captain. I'll get back to you shortly. He did. He called back, and he said, ma'am, the captain has sent 2 messages for you, and please know, ma'am, that I'm telling you this with all due respect. But the captain wanted you to know 2 things. Number 1, he said, let me remind you, ma'am, that I'm in charge and you are not. And number 2, this ship was designed and built with this very storm in mind. They knew what they were doing when they built it. They prepared for a storm just like this. And I think in the middle of our problems, in the middle of your storms, I pray God would remind you of those 2 things today. Hey, you're not in charge. If you're a follower of Christ, 1 Corinthians 6 tells us that we've been bought with a price. We're not our own. When you buy something, when you pay a price for something, you take over ownership, right? And the old owner doesn't get to dictate how you use the thing that you just purchased. You've been bought with a price. He paid for you with the blood of his son. He's in charge. He's the captain. He gets to call the shots. But how quickly we forget that. And listen, he designed you. And he's been building you. And he's been positioning you. And he's been preparing you for this storm. He had it in mind when he put you where you are. He knows what you can take. He knows what you can stand. Are you going to trust it? You're going to trust that there's purpose in the pain that you're facing? Are you going to trust that you're gaining strength from this storm, that your faith is growing in the face of whatever is fearful in front of you, that you're being taught that you can trust him through this test? If I were the captain, I would have told her a third thing. Your desired destination is just on the other side of this storm. The place that you want to go is just on the other side. So why would we put down anchor right here? Why would we go another way? You want to get to this paradise. You want to get to this place. Let's just go through it. The place that you want to be as a husband or a wife, the place that you want to be as a father or a mother, as a follower of Christ, is on the other side of this storm. Gain strength through it. Don't put down anchor. Don't try to get out of it. Don't try to avoid it. Allow God to do what he wants to do in and through you through the storm. Number 3, sometimes he allows the storms so that he can speak to us like never before. Sometimes he allows the storms to come into our lives so that he can speak to us like never before. He came to them walking on water, and he says, "Take heart, it is I, don't be afraid." He's never done this in this way. They've never listened quite like this. You want to get somebody's attention, you speak to them like this in the middle of the storm. They'll listen to anything, right? And maybe that's what God is doing in your life. And the reason I believe that he can so emphatically speak encouragement to us while you're in it is because he's walked through it. Hey, why are you freaking out? You're in a boat right now in the middle of the storm. I walked through it completely. I've been in the worst part without anything around me, and I was okay. He's lived on this planet. He's walked through the trials of life. Hebrews 4:15 tells us that this high priest, or Jesus, who it's talking about there, this high priest of ours understands our weaknesses. He faced all the same testings that we do, yet he did not sin. You ever been going through something and it's tough and it's heavy, and someone comes alongside of you and they're trying to help? They're trying to encourage, and they say, "Man, I know what you're feeling." You know, a sickness, a death, a betrayal, a hurt, a loss of some sort. And they come and say, "Hey, I know what you're feeling." And in your flesh, you just want to scream back in their face because you know they've never been through it. You want to say, "No, you don't." Am I the only one? You've never been through this. You don't know this hurt like I do. And we can be tempted to say that to God. Why would you put me in this? Look, Jesus can speak to whatever you're going through because he went through it. Sickness, death, pain, hurt, betrayal, death on a cross. He can speak to it. He knows it. But notice here that he comforts them with his words before he calms the winds. And I think that's what he wants to do in your life too. He doesn't just come in, winds calm down. No, he comforts them with his words before he calms the wind. Take heart. Pick up your courage. Find it. It is I. Literally in the Greek, I am. This is an Old Testament reference. Hey, I'm God. I am that I am is here. The God of all gods, all powerful, self-sufficient. I don't need anything else other than me is here with you in this. Take heart. I'm here. Don't be afraid. Now, I know it's simple and I know it's basic, but maybe God's wanting you to get along with him and his word even while the wind is howling. Even while the waves are crashing in, he's saying, "Hey, just get along with me. Allow me to speak to you through my word. I might not calm the wind right now, but I'll give you the strength to sustain through the storm. If you'll just trust me and listen." And maybe right now you're in the storm and it feels like he's silent. There was a time here where he's not there talking, right? Let me encourage you. He might not be speaking, but he sees you. He knows where you are. He sees right where you are. In verse 25, it says, "In the fourth watch of the night, from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., at the darkest point, at the latest and darkest, when they're 3 miles out in the middle of the sea, probably at their weakest," it says, "he came walking to them." How did he know where they were? Because he saw them. Because he knew. He wasn't like a frantic search party on the water. Okay, I know the boat's here somewhere. I sent them out here. It's not that big. I'll find them. And he's not searching and panicking and looking over the waves. He knows exactly where you are, and he's making a beeline from the mountain down to the shore onto the water, and he's coming to them. Because he sees them. He sees you. He knows where you are. He wants to come near to you. He wants to come to your advantage if we cry out to him. Point number 4 to finish up. Reminder, tying it all into this series that we've been in for the last 6 weeks. We will only sink if we shift our focus from faith to fear. It's all about where we fix our eyes. It's all about what we're looking at. It's all about what we're taking in. We will only sink when that takes place. It helps when we realize that faith and fear can't coexist. When fear comes in, faith exits. The word doubt here, when he says, oh, you have little faith, why did you doubt? The Greek word means to be pulled and trying to be in 2 different places at one time. You can't do it. You can't say, I want to be a man of faith and live constantly in fear. You can't say, I trust God completely, but all you ever do is doubt. All that's going to do is divide you, and then you're going to be defeated. That's how it works. What are you focusing on? I'll say it another way. When our focus shifts from Christ to our circumstances, it's when we begin to sink into sin. It's when we begin to sink into depression and discouragement and substances and debt and lust and anger and pride and envy, and you just name it. I shift from Christ to what I'm in, to what I'm around, to what I'm seeing, to what people are telling me. We see God allow Peter to do the impossible, but Peter had a problem. It's the same problem that you and I have. Peter's biggest problem wasn't the depth of the water or the height of the waves or the darkness or the night or the strength of the wind, and neither is yours. That's not your biggest problem. Your biggest problem, your biggest issue in the middle of these storms is a loss of faith, because that's when he started to sink. It didn't matter. The waves could have been triple the heights. As long as he had his eyes on Jesus and focused in faith, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter how hard the wind's blowing. It doesn't matter how strong this storm is. Our problem is a lack or loss of faith. We have that same problem so many times. My wife and kids and I, we went to Asheville a couple months back, and we went to this big arcade, and we walked up, and they had this gigantic hurricane simulator. You seen any of these things, like a tornado or hurricane simulator in any of these arcades? And so we walk up to this hurricane simulator, and we paid money to get inside of it. Now, this hit me this morning. Like, that's another story. But normally when you have hurricanes, what happens? You evacuate. You want people to get out. But we walked up and said, hey, let me pay money for something we're taught to avoid, right? It's a whole nother sermon. But that's what we did. And we walk up to this thing, and you put your money in, and you open this pod, this glass enclosure pod, and you're standing inside of it, and all of a sudden it starts piping in 100-mile-per-hour winds. I mean, it's just swirling in there. If I had any hair, it would have been just flowing around. It's got speakers and lights, so it's flashing like lightning and roaring like thunder inside of it. It has a fog machine to spit out this fog and mist, so it's just all whirling around you. It's chaotic. Stressful, but my wife and daughter were just a few inches away from us right outside of the glass. It was perfectly calm. My boys were inside of it with me, the wind and the sound and the lights and the mist and everything. It was just crazy, and they're banging on the glass, and they're wanting to get out. They want to get out of the pod. They want to get into the protection. They want to get into the peace that's just outside of that glass, right? I thought in that moment, when we have just a little bit of faith, like Peter did here. When we have just a little bit of faith in the middle of the storm, it's like that example is completely switched. And the hurricane is taking place on the outside, and he steps into this little perfect pod of protection and peace. Because it says once they got back into the boat that the wind stopped. He steps out in faith. The same wind, the same waves, the same chaos and confusion that was outside of the boat before is still there. But as long as he was focused on Christ, he was completely protected. He was at complete and perfect peace. But it was only when he said he saw the wind. How do you even see the wind? He saw the effects of it. He started seeing that water was there. And you know what he did? He opened up that pod of protection, and he started to step back out into the storm. But when we have just a little bit of faith, when we're protected completely by God, he wants us in that place with him. He wants you to walk on top of it. And he wants the world around you to end up worshiping him because of what you just went through. He wants that. They get back in the boat, and it said they began to worship him. They didn't get out on the water. They didn't experience that. They saw Peter's faith in the middle of it, and they began to worship him. Worship Jesus. Whatever storm you're in, I think God's wanting the world to be able to look and say, how are you able to take back that spouse and rebuild your marriage? How does that even happen? And they worship him. How are you able to stand by and watch them die with such peace and control? How in the world are you able to lose everything and carry yourself with such confidence? Because I'm not in the storm anymore. I'm standing on top of it. I'm walking in faith. I've got protection. I've got peace in the middle of this. Don't waste your storm. And if you'll allow me just to close this out, to switch from a water top experience to a mountaintop experience. Because I think this shift from faith to fear causes us to miss out on these water top experiences. It causes us to miss out on these mountaintop experiences in our lives. This past week, I went on a personal retreat to the mountains, just a personal spiritual retreat. And I went up to Ridgecrest, and Caleb Blanton, one of our worship leaders, used to work there, and he loves Ridgecrest, and he was telling me all these things. And one of the things he told me is he said, man, you've got to go see the lookout. You got to go to the lookout. He said, you will see God there. He said, you will have a mountaintop experience. So, whatever that means, that's where it happens right there. He told me exactly how to get there. He said, you drive up to the rec fields and then you go past them, and then there's this little single lane road over to the right, and you just follow that path, and at the top, you're going to have just one of the most amazing experiences ever. He told me that. He'd been there before. He'd experienced it. He knew it was the truth. But about halfway through, I didn't want to trust it. I started shifting from faith to fear. I started to go up the mountain, and it started to get steeper, and I started to think, what if my car breaks down right in the middle of this steep hill? Because that's been a common theme at our house recently, cars breaking down. So I thought, what? It's not worth it. I don't want to risk it. I should just turn around. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just turn around. But I thought, no, just keep going. And then, the road started getting to the point where there were just leaves covering it. I thought, I don't know if there's a road there. I don't know if this is even right. If it's that amazing, then more people would have been here, and the road wouldn't be covered. It would be heavily traveled. So I must have gone the wrong way. I need to turn around. Fear. It's trying to steal this experience. And then there was a sign that said, no right shoulder, roll over possible. I was in a big old wide SUV. I thought, I came for a retreat, not to roll off the side of a mountain. I should probably just back down slowly. I don't need to be up here. Thing after thing. The road turned to gravel. I thought, it's rained a lot recently. Might get stuck up here. Am I going to get a wrecker up here? All these things. I'm not lying to you. I'm not just making this up for sermon purposes. This was true. This is what was going on in my heart and mind in this moment. And isn't that what goes on in your heart and mind in different situations? When God says, go do this, go trust me, I can see, I know where you're going, I've been there before, I'm already ahead of you. But we don't trust the truth. Oh, this could happen. This might go wrong. This might not be there. I might not end up. And all that craziness in my mind, I almost missed out on this experience right here. Not a brick wall. A mountaintop experience. One of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen. There was a big scripture wall there, that I could just read over and be reminded of how powerful God was. I saw the radiance of His glory, to think that He spoke, and just mile upon mile of mountaintops was created. And almost missed it because of literal fear. And what's He telling you to do? Where is He telling you to go? How's He telling you to trust? You're climbing the mountain, and everything the enemy tries to, don't do this. You might roll over. He doesn't know. You might get stuck. And we miss these type of experiences. I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, man, I should have got out of the boat. I don't want to be like Peter either. Say, man, I wish I hadn't freaked out when I got out on the waves. I wish I just kept trusting. With every head bowed and every eye closed. We're going to worship. We're going to sing a song that we've sung many times about this. called oceans. I pray it wouldn't just be our lips moving to words that we know, that we're familiar with and comfortable with. I pray that whatever it is, that storm you're facing, that you've been kind of freaking out in, I pray that God would give you peace in the middle of it. Whatever He's been calling you to step out of the boat in, I pray that you would focus on faith. This is the last thing I'm going to say in this series. But I want to end on this with your heads bowed, your eyes closed, your hearts just you and God. Think on this thought. Stop focusing on what you are walking through and fix your eyes on who you are walking to. We're walking to our Savior. We're walking to our Lord. As long as we keep our eyes fixed there, we'll never sink. Completely protected, completely at peace. If you need to pray with someone during this time, we're going to have some friends just lining the back wall. You'll see people in blue Element shirts with lanyards. You'll see other people just standing there looking for you. They would love to pray with you during this time all along the back of this gym, so you don't even have to leave the room. It's right here for you. The others, you just need to just be alone, you and God. Others, let's sing this song like never before. Let's mean it from our hearts. Let's worship our Lord.